Hello class, welcome to the demo for 2D Design Module 1, Project 1, which is creating dynamic compositions. If you are watching this video, you should have already watched my PowerPoint presentation on the project, which is on your checklist, and it's also on the in your iCollege page. Okay, so what I've got here are the things that I need to get started on this project. I've got 3 magazines. I've got Bon Appetit, which is a food magazine, has lots of interesting food layouts. In food magazines, you'll find a lot of organic lines and shapes and not quite as much geometric. Ideally, if we're trying to achieve balance in our images, we're going to try to get photographs that have some of both. But we'll go over that. So Bon Appetit is a good magazine, or any kind of food magazine. I happen to have this Rolling Stone with President Obama on it. It had a few good pictures. Any kind of magazine that has larger pictures is what you want to aim for. So something like Rolling Stone fashion magazine, if you have it, is awesome. Especially those big fashion magazines. I don't know that anybody even looks at those anymore, or magazines at all. But if you happen to have some, they're good. This is a home decor magazine, Elle Decor. And this can have a lot of interior shots, so you get a lot of geometric. What I've done, I just wanted to show you the magazines that I used, that I could find. And up here I have the pages that I tore out as good examples. I've got my viewfinder. So what are we doing in this project? What we do is we start off looking through magazines, trying to look for bigger pictures like this one, and then we take our viewfinder and we're trying to create a dynamic composition by cropping out images in a way that is interesting. That we talked about how line can be dynamic, we talked about how diagonals can be dynamic, how verticals can be stable. And I'm wondering if I should try to zoom in a little bit here, because this might be hard for you to see on YouTube. Well, I'll try to see if you can see it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. This is going to be strange here to do live, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because I think you really need to see what I'm doing. Alright, we'll stop there. Sorry if I'm giving you vertigo. Alright, here we go. Alright, so what I'm going to show for you first is some examples of things that can be interesting. This is a large picture of a lamp or something like that. And if I put my viewfinder this way on it, I get vertical lines. And it could be dynamic, but this view is a little bit predictable. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not just reframing the photograph the way that the photographer intended. I can turn my image. Now I've got in my viewfinder, now I've got a diagonal composition. It's pretty interesting, but it's also, it's got some, it definitely has unity, right? So, and it's got some variety. These create unity. But if I move it like that, I start to get this wonderful, I don't know what that is. It's the base of the chandelier, and it's kind of a circle. So what I had before down here was just a bunch of straight lines. But if I move my viewfinder up here, in this corner, I get this wonderful dimensional, I guess it's an ellipse. And that, to me, makes this image a lot more interesting. If I do this, then it's kind of central to me. It's interesting still, but it loses a little bit of its dynamism. So I've got to move it back this way. And to me, that's more interesting. But I can turn it this way and try to get some horizontals. And what happens here? I can keep going like that. That's interesting too to me. But I kind of like it, you know, I really do like it with this being, having some diagonals. It's much more exciting. So if I consider this to be my picture plane, as I turn it this way, my diagonals, the angle of my diagonals changes. Okay, so the point that I'm trying to say is move your viewfinder around. Move your page around. Look at what a composition would be if you had it vertical or horizontal. Here's a vertical rendition of that, where you have your lines here are vertical too. But what if we want to try this, the diagonal lines of the lamp in a vertical orientation? Now keep in mind, the whole time that you're doing this, and if you've already reviewed the module folder like I asked you to, if you've already watched the PowerPoint presentation, sorry about this in my face, then you know what the finished work of this project looks like. So the finished work is going to be a really nice pen and ink drawing done with your Micron pens. Okay, you should have picked up your Micron pens from school, and if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, please do. A word about the Micron pens. They have different thicknesses. I don't know if you can see the numbers here, probably not. It's a little bit of a glare on it. But the 005 has a really teeny tiny point. It's really good for doing implied lines and things that you want to be super thin or delicate or off in the distance. Then the next, it goes up by number: 01, 02, 03, 05, and 08. And 08 is the thickest one. So you're going to be using your Micron pens for that final drawing. And to me, when I look at this, especially when I look at it here in my computer monitor, where it's further away from me, it almost already looks like a pen and ink drawing. And to me, I think this could be a very strong image. Okay, so I'm going through my magazines. I find I love this image. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pencil or a pen, and I'm going to go inside of my viewfinder, and I'm going to mark it like this. Now sometimes students have a hard time deciding on an orientation for their image, and if they cut it out, it seems too permanent. They're thinking, maybe I want it this way, but maybe I want to have, maybe I also like this image, or the image where we had it with diagonals. So what you can do, my point is there is a point, you can, I liked that one. You can mark several different positions if you want. If you're not ready to cut it out, go ahead and take your pencil or pen and mark different orientations. Then later you can decide which one you like best. And when you've decided, you can go ahead and cut it out, and you're going to keep it. Hang on to it. We want to get about 15 of these, or 20. Okay? The more the better. What we're doing by using this viewfinder is we are practicing our skill set at finding dynamic compositions. This was just great. This was a lot of fun, and I found it to be very dynamic and very interesting. It also meets the requirements of what you want to avoid. You want this image to be abstract, okay? So you don't want to have, you know, when you finish your drawing, you want it to have an air of mystery about it. You want it to just be interesting and dynamic, but you don't want to have it be something that someone says, oh, that's a landscape, or oh, that's an interior shot of someone's house, or, you know, you want to have that air of mystery, because what it does in this assignment is that it really has you to focus on the formal elements, and that's what this assignment is about. All right, so this was a good one. So this stack over here, I'm showing you images that I think are interesting, that are dynamic. In this pile, I've got some things to avoid. So let's keep going with this one. So I did show you a final student image that was just mostly fabric. It was really interesting. So another thing to note, if you get just a really interesting dynamic composition and it's got these words here in it, you can just omit those, okay? Just pretend they were never there, okay? Because we don't really want words in our, or letters or anything recognizable in our image. But this to me is very interesting. But also note that I haven't tried turning the paper yet, and I really recommend that you do that. I know that magazines are oriented one way, and the temptation is just to go through it like this. And you want to be able to turn, if you can't turn the magazine, turn the viewfinder. And what we're looking for is the most dynamic composition we can get in here. All right, so I don't know, I think this is pretty interesting, but you have to, I like this, you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to draw this. So keep that in mind. I have, students come to me and say, oh, look at this. I'm like, yeah, that's beautiful, but you're going to have to draw that, right? So if it's something that's like way, way complex and very teeny, and it's just, if you have the skills, then by all means go for it. But don't bite off more than you can chew. But we also don't want it to be too simple either. We really want to try to have something that's interesting. Something like this can end up looking like a landscape, or looking like rolling hills, or something that's kind of mysterious. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Next, this is some kind of chandelier with glass birds on it. So what you want to avoid with this is something like this. Okay, in the center here, that's just obviously a bird. Okay, but if you take this image and turn it and play with it, you might be able to abstract that bird a little bit. So let's see. Like this is interesting to me. As an ink drawing, I would have no idea what this is. What happens when you have these photos of glass is you get all kinds of reflections and interesting things going on in the glass. And to translate that into a pen and ink drawing, remember I did show you the drawing that a student did of a glass lamp with a bulb in it. And she really had the skills and the ideas to bring out all those interesting things and reflections that are going on in the glass. So if you decide to do something like that, like this, you have choices to make. How are you going to draw all this interesting reflection that's going on in here? How are you going to do it? Here, this shadow is super interesting also. So you might want to play with getting some reflection, some shadow. Maybe you want to turn it landscape orientation, and have the shadow doing something interesting and these coming in and being interesting. So that has a lot of possibilities. This one is very geometric. So it's almost got a little bit too much unity in it. There's a little bit of variety in the sizes. Like you have the big circle. The circles provide unity, right? The fact that this one is big and these are small provides some variety. So I don't know. Keep in mind this is a pen and ink drawing again, and this metal has some interesting reflections on it as well. But then in the background, there's really kind of a, I don't know if you can see it from there, but there's what looks like shadows of the lamp cast onto the wall in the background. That, when you combine that with this, it gets a lot more interesting for me. And again, you would omit this, this writing. And what you can do is just kind of pretend it's not there, make up something if you need to. So this one has interesting possibilities. This one I love. This is peaches on a grill, and there's a lot of really interesting things. Now, are you going to know that this is fire? Depends on how you draw it. Depends on how you crop it out. I'm going to keep it like this, and I'm going to try to find some interesting things. So the question is always, how are you going to draw it? Can you? I have a lot of people that have food magazines come with like these pictures of juicy meat, and although, you know, how are you going to draw that with pen and ink? So always ask yourself that question. And if the image excites you, go ahead and cut it out. And that's what the thumbnails are for. The thumbnails are for working out all these questions. And I'm going to show you some thumbnails in a minute. So we could have the grill going at a diagonal. And note that when you draw this in pen and ink, you know, it's not going to be obvious that this is a grill with some peaches on it. That's kind of interesting too, right there. Rule of thirds, right? 1, 2, 3, lining up the grill where the landscape would be. So if you were to frame it like this, it might end up looking like a landscape, just because you have that, you have the grill going along that lower third, and it kind of looks like a horizon line. All this stuff is going to be abstracted when you draw it. That's kind of interesting. So another one that's interesting. Okay, so what you would want to avoid is this. Please don't do that. No words. This is an image is boring. There's not a lot going on. I want you to try to find some images that have some complexity, that have one thing in front of another, that kind of end up having some interest. So if I move my viewfinder over here, I think some of this barley plant is pretty interesting. If I were to do something like this, I still think that it's got variety, and it has a lot of unity. It could be interesting, but it does have a little bit of a wallpaper quality to it. You might emphasize the ones that, this barley that's closer to you, you might make it thicker with thicker lines, and then the things that are back behind you, you might do thinner lines. Again, this is one of those things, if you have no interest in drawing this, or you think drawing this is going to be really hard, I wouldn't do it. Okay, so that's another example. This one I don't remember. This is clam shells. So this one has a little bit of organic and a little bit of geometric here. The grill, if you could find something that was interesting that had a little bit of both. If you were to just do this, you might be able to make it interesting. I'll show you some work in a minute that takes something like this and makes it really interesting. But you have to be careful. You want it to not have too much unity and not enough variety. So, you know, these cooking magazines, you can get into a situation very quickly where it's just all organic lines, and it starts to become chaotic, either chaotic or stagnant, just depending on how much variety there is and how much unity. Now these little clamshells have different sizes. Some are open, some are closed. So that's variety. This one is all the way open. So that's kind of interesting. Down here that you could put in some stripes. You could have some geometric. You have these man-made straight lines with the curve of the pan, and then you have these organic shapes coming in and out. So that one has some possibility. Something like this rice, this is what I get a lot, and this is what I mean by too much unity. If you are inspired to draw this, more power to you, but that's going to be a lot of the same thing over and over again. A lot of these, it's pretty much just rice. And you have a nice bell pepper here that creates some variety, but it still is probably going to either be stagnant or it's just going to feel chaotic. So if you wanted to draw something like this, you would want to try to incorporate some other things by moving your viewfinder around. Now, with food magazines, I do get a lot of compositions like this, and I'm kind of sick of them. But you get like the edge of a bowl or the edge of a plate as your geometric element, and then you get the chaos of the food in here. But those get boring after a while. So I would encourage you to keep on keeping on as far as trying to find something that's interesting. All right, what else do we have? This is some roots of a plant, and then you got leaves and you have roots. So I think this would be interesting if you had all roots. Well, this one is actually not bad. It would be pretty chaotic, but they get sparser up towards the top. But if you were to do something like this, I think that would be kind of boring, really. So, I don't know. When I look up in the camera, it looks a little bit more interesting. But if you can incorporate some of these leaves as a nice diagonal element, that's pretty interesting right there. And again, as you saw in the student work, I encourage you to have areas of black, like, maybe this, you're going to have these solid black. But if you have that much solid black over here in this corner, the visual weight of it is going to pull your composition down this way. So you might want to counterbalance with some areas of black in here. Or, maybe some of this is black. So that's what we mean by balance. I have here a little cheat sheet. You don't have to read it. I'll read it for you. But we've been talking a lot about unity and variety. I was just now talking about balance. Emphasis, what's emphasized? Where does your eye, how does the composition lead your eye? And my eye in this composition kind of goes along here and it ends up here where things are coming out of. So this, I would say, right about here is a focal point. And does your image have a really good opportunity to vary line thickness? That's very important in the drawings. So could you have some really thick lines, and could you have some thinner lines? Could you create a sense of space by having one thing that overlaps another, What else do negative space. Negative space here, I think, is pretty interesting. There's a lot of negative cutouts here that I think are activated. This has a nice mixture of diagonals, horizontals, and verticals. So that's variety, right? That makes it interesting. As far as geometric versus organic, well, it has a few more geometric elements. Most of it's organic. And do I have an opportunity in here for maybe some implied line or to create a sense of depth? Those are all things I want to think about when I'm choosing the image that I'm going to draw. So again, all these frames, once you find something that you like, mark it, cut it out with your scissors, put it in your sketchbook. Okay, here's some more that I wanted to demonstrate some things that you might want to avoid. This one, although it's a really cool image, it's really just too much it's too much unity. It's just kind of the same thing over and over again, and it feels a little bit, you start to get that, well, this feels like wallpaper, like a print that I would have on a tie or on a shirt or something, and it's too much pattern and repetition. So given that it has so much, that there's just a lot of unity. So I would avoid something like that. Another thing to avoid is artwork. Some of the magazines have artwork or design work that's somebody else's. So we don't want to say, oh, I'll just do this, right? Because that is just going to be copying somebody else's artwork. Even if you turn it or whatever, you can get a little bit of it in there, but you don't, my point is, you don't want to find a cool painting or a cool design element and just reproduce it. That's kind of missing the point. We want to try to create something new and mysterious, and we don't want to copy somebody else's artwork. Or like if you have a pattern, like a rug or a pillow or something, you can get part of it in there, but you don't want the whole thing to be just wanting to draw this carpet. See what I mean? The other thing we want to avoid, and I see a lot of students doing, is just taking your viewfinder and cropping out, just doing a smaller crop of the image itself. So if I were to do that in this image, I've taken a large photo of an interior and I've reduced it to a small photo of an interior. And once you draw it, it's still going to look like an interior, right? Is there some way to abstract this so it doesn't look as much like an interior? There might be. Something like that, you might, once you draw it, you might not be able to tell what it is. It might actually look cool. But you've got to be careful in how you do that if you want to have a non-representational image or abstract image. And again, you don't want to take this wonderful landscape and then just make it a smaller wonderful landscape. That's not the point, right? What we're doing is we're trying to abstract the subject matter, and we're trying to create a dynamic composition that's surprising and that's not really identifiable. That's a little bit more interesting, and this is one of those where if we were in class and you showed me this, and I would say, well, are you really sure you want to draw that? How's it gonna look as a pen and ink drawing? And trust me, I'm gonna show you, I don't think I put it on here, but I do have an image that I want to show you that a student came to me with a cutout of a National Geographic, and it was basically the skin of a mummy. Have you ever been to a museum and seen an actual mummified human? There was a cutout of a picture of a mummy, and I was like, how are you going to draw that? I would never draw that. She's like, trust me, I can draw it. I'm really good at stippling. I said, okay, I'll trust your judgment on it. And she did a thumbnail, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. So, if there's something that I say, I don't know if you want to do that, you might say, yeah, I do. I can do it. I get a lot of people that want to draw something like this, and that's a lot of work. That's going to be difficult. It's a lot of teeny tiny leaves, and then it's probably going to look just like what it is, which is a tree picture. We also don't want to have a human in it. We don't want to have anything recognizable. No recognizable images. This is abstract. If you get a leg in there, nobody's going to know that's a leg if you're drawing this. But again, you probably don't want to pick something like grass or from a distance, or trees from a distance to draw, because it's just it's a lot of work. And this is something to avoid. Don't, that's an ear. Even if you don't have the whole face in there, I don't don't want you to A, use somebody else's artwork, or B, use something that's recognizable. Something else to avoid. Please don't do that. This is a central composition. It's the Starbucks logo. It's a cup. We know what it is. I don't think there's anything on this page that you can really abstract. This gets to be interesting, but it's not big enough. All right, more things to avoid. Things that are just up close and in your face and that have lettering in it. That's not what we want to do. Not only does it have lettering in it, but it's just one object and it's really close up. It's just not very interesting to look at. And another one, if you were to do something like that, it's going to look like exactly what it is, which is a landscape. So you would have to try to abstract it and make it somewhat mysterious by trying to turn it and find something. This, to me, looks, and also one thing to be aware of, what we're doing is we're going to be doing a black and white pen and ink drawing, and a lot of these images are interesting because of the color. You know, if you said, well, hey, what about this? This is gorgeous. It looks like a painting. Well, that's true, but we're not making a painting. If we were making a painting, I think this would be super interesting, abstract painting. But the question is, how are you going to draw it? And, you know, if you convince me that you have a good idea, and that you know a way to, you know, maybe you're an expert at stippling. That's probably what could reproduce this the best, is stippling. So if you don't know what stippling is, it is when you take your pen and you just make dots over and over and over. Lots of dots. That's stippling. All right. So different ways of mark making. You should think about it. We've talked a lot about varying line thickness. You can use stippling if you want. You can use some cross-hatching if you want. And I'm about to show you the next step. Okay, so let's say we've done that. We've cut out, we've marked our composition, we've taken paper, and we've cut it out. So what we're going to do is take those little images and we're going to study them, and we're going to try to decide what thumbnails we want to draw. What little compositions excite you the most. Let me show you an example of students' thumbnails. Oops, cutouts. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Hold on just a sec. All right. So here's an example of someone's sketchbook. They have taken the images that they cut out, and they are they've pasted them in their sketchbook. So a lot of people have asked me, well, why are we saving these things if we're not going to use them? Well, what this is to me is it's visual evidence of your journey. Your journey is to find something that's compositions that are interesting. This is kind of like your learning process. So this is what your sketchbook is going to look like, and the cutouts are going to live in your sketchbook once you've decided which ones you're going to do the thumbnails of. You don't want to probably glue those down right away if you're going to draw them, because you might want to be able to handle them a little bit. Let me show you what students' thumbnails have looked like. Okay, here is a student's thumbnails. On the top two on the left, she's got her cutout, and then she's got her drawing, drawing example right next to it. That one, the top one, is a bat. It's this crazy, weird close-up of a bat from a National Geographic magazine. That second one is just like a yogurt ad, and it's, you know, I wasn't sure how much it would abstract, but it abstracted pretty well. Pardon me. And then on the bottom, she has this raspberry. And that is a good example of a really nice use of stippling. She did a great job. She used the density of the dots to create value. And remember, value is lightness and darkness. So density is when you're making marks like cross hatching, which are just lines that overlap each other, or using stippling. Density is what determines darkness. So if you have a dense area of dots, meaning they're really close together, those dots are obscuring the white of the paper, therefore the value is darker. If you look at up top here where she has this area, that's lighter. And more of the white of the paper is showing through because the dots are further apart. Okay, so think about when you're doing your drawing, your thumbnail, how can I incorporate different ways of mark making? I want to have some solid areas of black. I want to have some stippling. I want to have varied line thicknesses. I want to have some geometric and organic qualities. I want to have a composition that's not central, something that's interesting. All right, so that's one set of thumbnails. I have a couple more to show. And this is someone else. So you'll get to see, you know, all the different kind of drawing skills and different ideas about what makes an interesting composition. I really thought this guy's work was interesting, this student. He really made an effort to vary up his mark making, to vary up his value, to balance those areas of black. That first image is like this abstract, it's like a rope hanging from something, and then there's maybe a building in the background. I don't know, it's interesting. That second one is some kind of National Geographic photo of like jerky, for lack of it's a carcass of some sort. And he's made it interesting. On the bottom, we have just something from the fashion magazine. It's a pair of shoes, I think, and a handbag. But it doesn't look like that on the drawing. It's pretty interesting. Again, notice the variety of marks that he's made in his drawings, the stippling, variation of line thickness, all kinds of stuff going on here. And last one. So this is interesting. I think that she did a really interesting job. The one on the top I like. I think that it's interesting, but in a way it's not really all that abstracted. I mean, it's got that nice pattern, and the crystal looks nice. And then the second one, the tomato, I think is pretty interesting also. It is, you know, it is from a food magazine. It's all organic. So, you know, that's a tough one to try to make interesting, but I think she did a good job with it. And then that last one, I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be something from a food magazine.